Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today as we talk about how words matter and how to promote a positive relationship with food at school. My name is Liz Fraser, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm a public health dietitian with Alberta Health Services. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are joining this session from across Treaty 4, 6, 7, 8, and 10 territories, as well as 6 Métis regions. These lands are a traditional meeting place and home for many Indigenous peoples. I respect the treaties made on these lands and honor the many Indigenous peoples whose rich and vibrant cultures, traditions, histories, and language are essential to the healing and well-being of all people. I'm incredibly grateful for the food and nourishment we have today because of Indigenous stewardship practices that have cared for this land. Before I jump into content, I do want to share a content warning that diet, eating disorders, disordered eating, weight, and body image will be discussed as part of this session. We all come with our own unique histories, and some of the information may be difficult to hear, especially if you have similar experiences of your own. I encourage you to take care of yourself, which may include turning off the sound or disengaging to allow yourself to collect your thoughts. You may also choose to exit out of the session entirely. I invite you to re-engage or join again when and if you feel ready. If you are feeling distressed, please reach out to a trusted healthcare provider or connect with one of the other available services that are shown on the screen. I also want to provide a heads up that in sections of this presentation, I will use the word fat as a neutral descriptor, like I would use the descriptors short, tall, rectangular, or purple. This word has been reclaimed as a neutral term within the fat acceptance movement, which includes groups and individuals who envision a culture where all fat people are free, celebrated, and liberated from every form of oppression. I do acknowledge that the use of this word can feel uncomfortable or even traumatizing to many people due to the derogatory associations that have been connected with this word. As with other terms that have been reclaimed by marginalized groups, the label fat can be used by folks who have reclaimed the word for themselves, but it's best to avoid applying labels of any type without permission given by the individual. And for this reason, the word fat will only be used as a neutral descriptor, and I will not use it as a specific label towards an individual. In the session today, we will start by exploring what influences how we think about food in our bodies and how these tie together. Next, we will look at how you can lead change in the classroom and school environment and work on applying some of the strategies in the form of case studies and personal action planning. We will finish off by summarizing our learnings today, and I will also share where you can access resources, teaching tools, and further readings. This is an emerging content area for educators and healthcare professionals alike, and we're all learning together. Your experience with this topic may vary. Some viewers may be very familiar with these topics, and for others, it may be the first time that you're hearing these messages. The intent today is to spark opportunities for reflection, to consider discussion points to bring back to your school, and to provide a few practical examples and ideas that you can implement in your classrooms and even in your personal life. Let's start off by exploring why words matter. Do any of these quotes sound familiar to you? I'm going to have to go for a run after eating this. I don't want them on our team. I bet they'll slow us down. Or you can only eat your cookie after you've eaten the healthy parts of your lunch. Are there times when you've overheard statements such as these? Or perhaps you have said or thought something similar? Take a moment to think about how these statements make you feel, or to think about other examples that are similar. Feel free to pause the video and take as much time as you need to reflect. We will return back to these statements to build on our understanding of why words matter. Social norms shape values and beliefs of individuals and groups. This includes beliefs and values around body appearance and ways of eating. Current social norms tend to emphasize thinness, appearance, and shape, or the ideal body image, above health. The ideal body image changes over time, but it often includes thinness, low body fat, or being muscular. This can lead individuals to pursue dieting behaviors like restricting calories, eating certain types of food, such as those that are perceived to promote weight loss, and labeling foods as good or bad. This goes beyond just dieting, however, and it impacts us all at varying levels. And some people refer to these social norms as diet culture. These social norms can show up in sneaky ways and may even be disguised as wellness, a lifestyle, or healthy living. In accordance with these social norms, achieving the ideal body type is equated with morality, being right or proper or having good behavior, as well as being healthy. Weight loss and the pursuit of thinness is promoted at all costs as a means of attaining higher status in our social groups or rejecting other ways of eating and the people who do not fit this idealized image. However, even though these social norms influence people to believe that physical appearance is a signal of good overall health and self-control, many individuals are pursuing these behaviors at the expense of their physical, mental, or spiritual health, which are components of the true definition of health. These issues are systemic, and we are influenced by our social structure. No one person is responsible for the harms that are caused, but we all have a role to play in challenging these social norms. It can be difficult, though. Preoccupation with appearance and food choices can be overt, but it also covertly shows up across every setting in which we exist. So let's take a look at that. Some examples of how social norms influence our thoughts, attitudes, and behaviors include media. The way that media, including social media, magazines, and morning talk shows, portray people in larger bodies has a significant impact on the attitudes that we develop towards people in larger bodies. Media idealizes smaller body types and stigmatizes larger bodies by commenting on celebrity bodies, by inviting guest speakers to talk about the latest diet fads on their show, or encouraging weight loss New Year's resolutions. It's been calculated that 72% of images and 77% of videos in the media stigmatize people with larger bodies. Other examples include influencers or celebrities selling a lifestyle, marketing or advertising selling the idea of an ideal body or ideal life, people with larger bodies being cast as villains or unlikable characters in movies and TV shows, or their background characters, or the goofy sidekick. You may even see this in stores where full ranges of clothing and body size are often not represented, in particular for in-store shopping. We can't control all of the influences that exist around us, but there are opportunities to further enhance school environments. Your classroom or space in the school is somewhere where you have the ability to make a difference. We will now revisit these three phrases and explore them further. The first phrase, "I'm going to need to go for a run after eating this," may be something that a coworker states to another in the lunchroom while eating a slice of birthday cake that was brought in. This first statement is an example of fat phobia. Fat phobia is a fear of fat or fatness that results in negative attitudes, stereotypes, and behaviors towards fat people or people with larger bodies. Fat phobia can be conscious or it can be unconscious, and it affects us all on some level. Often when introduced to the term or the concept of fat phobia, people have a tendency to initially reject the idea that it applies to them. We tend to think of examples like arachnophobia, the fear of spiders, where someone may run away crying if they see a spider. And so we may think comparatively, okay, that sounds really extreme. I'm not scared of fat people. I don't run away. This doesn't really affect me. However, fat phobia creates an environment where people are afraid of becoming fat. Going back to our phrase, "I'm going to need to go for a run after eating this," even though it's often said as a joke, and the person saying it may not even intend on going for a run, when we dig down and ask why can't you eat this food without feeling like you need to make a joke? why you need to play off your feelings of guilt and shame for eating this food. Why do you feel like you have to run to burn off what you're eating? When we dig down to the bottom of those whys, it often comes down to this food has more calories than I feel comfortable with, and calories must equal weight gain, which equals becoming fat, and I'm fearful of becoming or being fat. Fat phobia also creates an environment where fat people, because of their body size, experience the stigma and discrimination that comes along with this fear. The second phrase may be something that a student thinks about another student while picking teams for gym class. I don't want them on our team. I bet they'll slow us down. This statement is an example of weight bias, and I'm going to use it to explain weight bias, weight stigma, and weight discrimination. Weight bias refers to our own personal attitudes and beliefs about people with larger bodies. For example, we may see someone with a larger body and think that they're lazy or unintelligent based solely on their body size. Weight stigma refers to social stereotypes and misconceptions about people with larger bodies. Stereotypes are widely adopted, simplified beliefs and could include assumptions such as people with larger bodies eat too much or they don't exercise enough. Personal bias and social stereotypes can be very similar as we're shaped by our environments, our culture, and our family, and these influence what we see, hear, think, and feel about others. Weight discrimination refers to when we act on those personal weight biases and stereotypes and treat people with larger bodies unfairly. Examples of weight discrimination include providing chairs that only fit smaller bodies, hiring policies that exclude individuals of all shapes and sizes, and verbal or emotional bullying. Negative consequences of weight bias, stigma, and discrimination include feelings of shame, anxiety, depression, poor self-esteem, and body dissatisfaction. This can lead to practices such as skipping meals, fasting, excluding religious practices, or exercising to compensate for calories consumed in order to control weight. In the example phrase, I don't want them on our team, I bet they'll slow us down, having that personal thought that a classmate in a larger body can't run fast is an example of bias. The stereotype that people in larger bodies are slow is stigma. And finally, no one choosing that student to be on their team or that student always being picked last is discrimination. I'll give you a moment to reflect on whether you've noticed other examples of weight stigma, bias, or discrimination in your classroom. Feel free to pause the video if you would like more time to reflect. In the presentation resources, there's a link to a tool where you can check your bias. The first step in changing your automatic biases or stereotypes towards other people is becoming more aware that they exist. Our last phrase, you can only eat your cookie after you eat the healthy parts of your lunch, may be said by a teacher or a volunteer at lunchtime to a student. This phrase will be used to discuss the last key concept, which is food morality. Food morality can be described as labeling food as good or bad, which can make children and adults feel like they are being good or bad when they eat these foods. For example, have you ever thought, oh, I was so bad over the weekend. I had pizza on Friday and cake on Sunday. The way that we talk about foods could even imply that some foods need to be earned. In our sample phrase, you can only eat your cookie after you eat the healthy parts of your lunch, it can be interpreted as the other foods in the lunch need to be eaten first because they're the better foods, and the student needs to earn the right to eat their cookie. Children may internalize these types of messaging about food as a reflection of who they are. This can lead to thoughts of guilt and shame when they eat these quote-unquote bad foods, and these feelings can lead to an unhealthy relationship with food, including dieting behaviors. According to popular cognitive development theories, children under the age of 12 have concrete thought processes, and it can be challenging, if not impossible, for them to understand why chips may be called bad because they're high in fat, but avocados, which are also high in fat, are considered a good food. When a child learns that some of the foods their parents provide, due to finances, cultural significance, taste, or availability, are considered to be these bad foods, this can create confusion and distrust within the home. Understanding how we discuss food and food choices and how these messages might be perceived by children is one of the goals of a food-neutral classroom. We've heard from schools and food providers that it can be a struggle to not think of foods or label foods as good or bad, stop or go, or most often or least often foods, when there are food policies in place that categorize food using such guidance. These scenarios aren't what we're referring to when we talk about food morality. School food provision policies are in place to ensure that children are being offered nutritious foods when food is being provided in the school environment. Direction on what foods to provide or offer a population of students is different than the nutrition education for learning about foods and making individual food choices. We've discussed fat phobia, weight bias, stigma and discrimination, and food morality. Now let's take a look at what some of the issues are. Despite what social norms have led us to believe, we can't measure someone's health by their body size or weight, and nor should we make assumptions about the health of someone based on the size of their body. There's actually a paradox that exists that shows an association between having a larger body and having longer survival in many chronic diseases compared with people with smaller bodies with these conditions. Recent studies also suggest that individuals who experience weight stigma and discrimination are at an increased risk for chronic disease due to the negative consequences of the discrimination as opposed to their physical size. There are a number of factors that influence a person's size, and diet and exercise are only a small factor. There's such an emphasis on eat less and move more, or they're so fat, they must only eat burgers and fries. And the reality is, size is dependent on a complexity of factors, including early childhood development, genetics, employment, emotional health, medications, sleep, and housing. Two people can eat the exact same diet and do the exact same exercise and be different sizes. Weight is not a self-inflicted choice or an individual behavior problem. In fact, weight is not a behavior at all, and it shouldn't be used as a measure of success for healthy eating or physical activity policies, programs, or campaigns. This helps explain why weight loss dieting doesn't work for sustained weight loss. There's high-level evidence to support that weight loss is greatest within 6 months to 1 year following intentional weight loss. Then, regardless of the degree of weight that was lost, most weight is regained within a 2-year period, and by 5 years, the majority of people, which is 95 to 97% of individuals, are back at their pre-intervention weight. And of those approximately 95% of people, 1 to 2/3 of them will actually gain back more weight than they lost, resulting in a higher end weight than they started with. And this can lead to people feeling like failures, like they don't have willpower, like their bodies are working against them, when really it's the dieting that's failing them. Another issue is how we collectively tend to define healthy eating. I want you to take a minute to reflect what the term healthy eating means to you. There is no right or wrong answer here. I'll pause for about 10 seconds, but please feel free to pause the video longer if you would like time for more reflection. It's common to define healthy eating based on the inclusion of certain foods that are deemed good for you or healthy based on their nutrition profile. They either have a lot or a little of a particular nutrient of interest. And while the nutrient profile of food is factual, and the information can be helpful to ensure that we're getting what our bodies need to grow and to prevent disease, it's important to remember that health includes not only physical, but also mental and social well-being. Healthy eating is about more than what we eat. It's also about when, where, why, and how you eat. There's no one definition of healthy eating, and healthy eating looks different to everyone because we all have our own unique preferences, backgrounds, lifestyles, and needs. Healthy eating includes making choices that reflect taste, so choosing a variety of foods and flavors that you like. Culture and food traditions can be a great way to add enjoyment to your food. Your household budget and lifestyle. You might be wondering, what are the impacts on children from hearing messages that reinforce the social norms around body size, shape, appearance, eating behaviors, and food choices? And the answer is, body dissatisfaction in children and how they're viewing others starts young. Children start sensing their bodies as their own by 2 to 3 years old. And by 4 to 5 years old, children are already more likely to associate people with larger bodies as having negative characteristics compared to people with smaller bodies. By age 6, especially in girls, children start expressing concerns about their weight or shape. And although not all children express concerns, 40 to 60% of elementary age girls are concerned about their weight or becoming too fat. Around the age of 9 is when we start to see clinical eating disorder diagnoses, although this can happen younger in some individuals. In Canada, hospital admissions for eating disorders is highest in the 15 to 19-year-old age group, followed by the 10 to 14-year-old age group. In Canada, a third of girls and a quarter of boys aged 10 to 14 report dieting to lose weight. And looking at older teens, up to 2/3 of teenage girls and 1/3 of teenage boys have attempted weight loss at some time in the past, using weight control methods such as skipping meals, smoking, vomiting, or taking laxatives. What's the potential for harm in the way that nutrition education and body image messages are delivered? There is a relationship between dieting, disordered eating, and eating disorders. Let's take an example of a younger child. They like to be helpful and follow the rules, but whenever we're asking them to compare two items, they're thinking in concrete ways, black and white, good and bad. They hear messaging that certain food is bad or that they should look a certain way, and that can be internalized. It only takes one exposure to a dieting type message or a perceived message, what we say is not always what they hear, to increase established risk factors for eating disorders. It's unclear whether dieting behavior causes, triggers, or represents the first stage of clinical eating disorders. However, in a study of 14 to 15-year-old adolescent girls who were engaging in strict dieting practices, they were 18 times more likely to develop an eating disorder within 6 months than their non-dieting peers. They also had almost a 20% chance of developing an eating disorder within 1 year. Eating disorders have the highest overall mortality rate of any mental illness, with estimates between 10 to 15% mortality. And in Canada, the mortality rate associated with anorexia nervosa is 12 times greater than all other causes of death combined for females aged 15 to 24 years old. Eating disorders have physical and psychological consequences with both short and long-term impacts. Complications affect the whole body and include the heart, bones, teeth, hormone production, digestive system, skin, hair, nails, growth, and neurological systems, which can influence concentration and ability to sleep. Adolescence is a time of social and psychological development. And while there aren't many studies that look at the psychological consequences of dieting in youth, Studies that look at the adult population have found association between chronic dieting behaviors and behaviors such as irritability, fatigue, food preoccupation, and distractibility. Lifelong eating habits are established in adolescence, so this can lead to lifelong dieting behaviors and poor body image. As we can see on the slide, this cycling of dieting behavior and poor self-esteem and body image has the potential to shift from disordered eating behaviors to clinical eating disorders across the spectrum of eating and body image attitudes. In a study of patients who had received an eating disorder diagnosis and were undergoing high-level treatment, they were asked if they remembered where the message or the messages that set the trajectory of their eating disorder into motion came from. For those patients who could recall the source of messages that their brain really grasped onto, 46% of them recalled that it came from within a school context, either the education itself, the environment, or comments from students and teachers. Just to be clear, the cause of eating disorders are complex, and the illness is a manifestation of the interactions between neurobiology, genetics, personality traits, and environments. So these messages that are referred to in this 46% statistic, they're just one piece of the puzzle, not the cause. But it does shed some light on how words matter within schools. Now that we've established some background understanding of why words matter, let's take a look at how you can lead change in your classroom and school. In this section, we'll look at how we can approach food and nutrition at school in ways that support students in having a healthy relationship with food and their bodies. We will explore actions that educators, administrators, and volunteers can take both in the classroom and in the broader school environment. These strategies we look at can be adapted for use in classrooms and school of all different grades. When we take a food-first approach to teaching food and nutrition, the goal is to foster a positive relationship with food over time. You can try to inspire curiosity about food through experiential learning and food exploration. This can include providing students with repeated neutral exposures to different foods without any pressure to try it. For example, this could be reading or learning about food, seeing foods, touching different foods, growing food, watching others try food. Removing the pressure makes space for curiosity, exploration, and learning at one's own pace. In grades where it may be part of the curriculum to analyze personal eating behaviors, as an example, this can be done without analyzing specific food or nutrients in a student's intake, such as amounts of calories, sugar, or salt that a student eats in a day. Instead, a more neutral approach may look like asking students to explore the reasons they were eating and how this may change in different settings. Students can reflect on their hunger and fullness, social connectivity, whether they were preparing for a sporting event or a test, what works for them and what doesn't. They may also choose to analyze the number of new recipes or food exposures they experience. Older grades may also want to focus on food systems. Select and integrate information can include gathering information on where food is grown, how it's transported, how it's sold to customers. Students can explore where people access food, whether they know any farmers, and how the agricultural industry impacts the local economy. Try using neutral language when discussing and identifying food. Often these neutral words are descriptive in nature and describe the sensory aspect of the food, such as color, shape, smell, flavor, and texture, rather than the food's nutritional value. Example are words such as crunchy, spicy, or round. Try not to label food as good for you or bad for you, and instead refer to the foods by their actual names. For example, call a cookie instead of a treat. Labeling foods by words such as treats can put them on a pedestal and give them special status, which often makes these foods seem more appealing than they would be thought of if they were just another food on the plate. If there's a component on label reading in the curriculum that you teach, A neutral approach can be comparing which foods have more or less of ingredients without labeling either as better or healthier. Exploring a label to find certain ingredients, like peanut or soy. Or it can be an opportunity to explore the chemical names or functions of items in the ingredient list. For example, ascorbic acid is vitamin C, and it keeps canned products from turning brown after they're sliced, and it also helps prevent spoiling. Calcium aluminum silicate is an anti-caking agent, and that prevents table salt or muffin mix from clumping together. Last but not least, emphasizing the positive aspects of eating a variety of food and the enjoyment of food rather than focusing on the effects of unhealthy eating. This can involve providing messages such as eating a variety of food helps with nutrition, provides us with energy to chase friends on the playground, exposes us to different tastes and textures, and allows us to explore the cultural aspects of food and eating. These messages are emphasized on the second side of the Canada Food Guide snapshot. Or you might provide messaging such as understanding that all foods provide nutrients to the body of some sort, but no foods can provide the body with all of the nutrients that the body needs to run at its best. This is why it's important to eat a variety of foods. We can shift our focus by teaching about where foods come from, how it's grown and prepared, eating with others, and learning about traditional foods. And these are all examples of food literacy skills. Food literacy is having the knowledge, skills, and attitudes necessary to choose, grow, prepare, and enjoy food to support one's health, community, and environment. Development of food literacy skills in younger grades can start with learning practical skills such as age-appropriate food preparation, skills like washing, tearing, cutting, mixing, gardening, and learning about food and culture. As students get older, they can start to learn to categorize foods such as protein foods, whole grains, vegetables, and fruit, and focus on factual information about what those foods do for the body. Lessons and education on physiology and media literacy are also topics for junior and senior high students. Along with focusing on eating for physical health, it's also important to recognize how food supports our social and mental well-being by honoring food's connections to culture, tradition, history, community, and the land. Food is a source of enjoyment, and it can hold deep personal and cultural meaning. Food education is most meaningful when it considers all of these aspects and helps students connect food to their lived experiences. In the broader school environment, whether it's the lunchroom, the cafeteria, recess, or an after-school activity, you can help support the development of positive relationships with food by respecting roles around food. Ellen Satter, a dietitian and psychotherapist, coined a concept called the division of responsibility, or the roles of adults and children around mealtimes. In the division of responsibility, it's the adult's role to decide what, when, and where food is offered. It's the child's role to decide if and how much food will be eaten. This division of responsibility can be applied to mealtimes in schools, although the adult roles are split between parents and caregivers and the school. Children are still responsible for if and how much of the foods they will eat, including the order in which the foods are consumed. Schools are in charge of what food is offered when it's being provided or sold by the school. For example, schools determine what foods are offered during special lunch days, in the cafeteria or canteens, during staff meetings, or what's available in vending machines on school grounds. Schools can role model wellness by providing food variety. The role of when and where students can eat is also the role of the school. Break time and lunches are set within the day, and they should allow for adequate time for students to get settled and eat their meals without feeling rushed. Schools can enhance the role of providing spaces where students can eat their food by providing comfortable spaces for students and staff to eat that's free from food talk. Ways to go about this is to limit distractions such as screen times, avoiding commenting on what you, your students, or your colleagues are eating or drinking, and instead role model healthy eating habits by treating meals as ways we connect socially. If talking about food, comment on the sensory experience such as crunchy, gooey, crisp, sweet, or spicy. Parents and caregivers decide what foods are packed for meals and snacks. Children are not often in charge of the foods that they bring to school or what food is available in the home. The foods that students bring to school reflect the family's needs and resources. Each child's food experience, abilities, and preferences are going to be different. In junior and senior high school, students may gradually take on the role of what? By choosing from foods available at home or purchasing foods at the cafeteria or nearby stores and restaurants. It's their role at this stage to explore what does and doesn't work for them as they find their own ways with food. It is not part of the school's role to determine what foods the students bring with them, nor to control what is being eaten. Ultimately, students decide whether and how much to eat from what was packed or what's offered at school. Respect students' decisions about how much to eat. This includes eating food in the order that they choose. Trust students when they tell you that they're full or they're hungry for more, to support the development of their own trust in what their bodies are telling them. Across the school community, aspire to provide an environment where all bodies are welcome and celebrated. Every person, regardless of their body size, deserves compassion and respect. To create an environment in which all bodies feel welcome, include photos of people in all body shapes being physically active, eating nourishing foods, and having a good time. Check to see if seating and equipment can be accommodating to larger bodies. Take a walk through your school halls and classroom. Reflect on, are all bodies represented in images and teaching materials? Are there spaces and places that are comfortable for everyone? Are there things your school could be doing better? Avoid implications that some bodies are better than others. At times, we can unintentionally imply that some bodies are better than others. For example, providing messaging that fruit and vegetables are a good way to manage a person's weight may imply that thinner bodies are healthier. Similarly, commenting that a student looks muscular, fit, and strong in gym class may imply that a muscular body type is better and more deserving of praise. It's best to avoid commenting on a person's outward appearance for any reason, whether the comment is intended to be positive or negative. Instead, focus on what bodies can do, how they think and move, and how your body feels. Enjoyable movement, or the energy that you get from eating well. Set boundaries. It can be important to set boundaries that keep both you and your students safe and feeling well. You may wish to consider your school's values or the policies that are currently in place. Teachers and administrators can lead by example by role modeling healthy boundary setting. For example, setting rules or guidance around not commenting on personal appearance or lifestyle choices. And finally, treat weight-based or size-based teasing with zero tolerance. Weight-based discrimination is one of the more common and in some ways almost acceptable forms of discrimination in schools. And this is partially because it's so pervasive in our social environment. Treat reports of weight-based or size-based bullying the same way that you would treat any other form of teasing or bullying between students. Often the first reaction may be to state, "Oh no, you're not fat," to a student who expresses that they're receiving comments about their size, which can actually reinforce the concept that fat is bad and doesn't get at the issue of the bullying. Focus the acknowledgement towards what the child felt about the exchange and the exchange itself as the problem, not the child's body. You could say, "Thank you for bringing this to my attention and coming to talk to me. It is not okay when people make comments about our bodies. I have a few suggestions of how we can address this. What do you think about these ideas?" When we look specifically at language, the words we use impact the way that we think about health, food, and nutrition. The table on this slide highlights a few key points to consider when framing nutrition and health messaging and education. This includes using language that acknowledges multiple dimensions of health, including physical, emotional, social, intellectual, spiritual, occupational, and environmental, not just physical health. Understanding that pursuing a healthy lifestyle can happen at all body weights. Promoting lifestyle behaviors such as adequate sleep, stress management, physical activity, and eating nourishing foods allows people to live a healthy life at any size. Adopting strategies that are positive, encouraging, and focus on what's gained by eating certain foods. Positive messaging can lead to higher motivation for behavior change. Focusing on intrinsic reasons to eat a variety of foods, such as feeling great and having energy, rather than external rewards, such as for appearance, having a thin or fit body type, for weight, or how others may think or feel about the person. And acknowledge that being active can happen at all sizes, and being active should be enjoyable and at an intensity that's appropriate for each person. There are many benefits of being physically active, and messages should promote what is gained from any type of movement rather than the health risks of inactivity. Sometimes, comments made about someone's body, physical activity, or food choices can create negative feelings and behaviors even when well-intended. And these comments can be difficult to respond to. The Leeds, Grenville, and Lanark Health District in Ontario has developed a resource titled Clever Replies to Damaging Remarks. This resource provides suggested responses that can be used in uncomfortable situations and strategies for providing compliments without commenting on a person's body size or shape. For example, if someone comments, "Wow, are you going to eat all of that food?" A reply you might offer is, "I might. I listen to my body and I stop eating when I'm comfortable." These ideas are included in the resource that will be included with this presentation. These are some further ways to think and speak about food and activity. Instead of judging or labeling specific foods as good or bad, try using other words that are more descriptive, such as, "This apple is juicy, crisp, and sweet," or "This casserole is warm, filling, and tasty." Remind ourselves and our students that all bodies need rest. It's how we recharge. People are not lazy for taking time for the rest that they need, and it's a form of self-care. And physical activity should never feel like or be framed as a chore or a punishment. As with food and eating, it can be helpful to focus on including movement that brings joy and makes you feel fulfilled and satisfied. Let's move on to discussing how you might apply some of these concepts in the classroom using case studies. Let's consider the following scenario. A staff member has started a new healthy eating and physical activity promotion challenge. As part of this initiative, all students will be weighed and will calculate their BMI. Pause the video and reflect on some of these questions. What concerns, if any, would you bring forward? Are there any suggestions you would provide? You may have thought of a few different answers, and there are many wonderful ideas beyond what I have on the screen. The main concern is that we want to keep the focus away from body weight in our schools. Children are supposed to be gaining weight. They're growing, and weight gain is a sign of development and health. Children's growth patterns vary greatly, which makes the assessment of a healthy body weight tricky, and it's appropriate only for healthcare professionals. Measuring or monitoring of body weights by school staff or students is not appropriate. This scenario is also an example of weight stigma. It assumes that students who are not of a quote-unquote normal body weight, according to BMI, don't eat well or move their bodies. It also assumes that weight is something that can be modified by diet and exercise, when there are so many factors that influence body weight. What's interesting is that research shows that focusing on body weight can actually lead to decreased physical activity and an increase in unhealthy eating behaviors. One of the most important strategies to reduce weight bias and stigma is self-awareness. We need to be aware of our own personal biases and cultural stigmas. In the resources you will receive as part of this session, there's a link that you can explore to help identify and address your own assumptions and attitudes about weight. So what can you do instead? Focus on what the school can do. Offer healthy foods in the cafeteria and vending machines, and allow time for movement breaks. Students can participate by taste testing new menu items and voting on options that they would like to have offered in the school. When providing education on the benefits of food and activity, redirect the focus away from weight or appearance and instead focus on benefits such as mood and enjoyment. Encourage students to identify and honor their hunger and fullness cues. This case study looks at how students may talk about their own bodies or their classmates' bodies. You have noticed a few of the students in your class body shaming others, and you've overheard them talk about dieting on a few occasions. You can pause the video to reflect on approaches that you would take to address this type of scenario in your classroom. This is a very common and relatable case study, and that's because body talk is everywhere. It's well established that media promotes unrealistic standards of beauty and plays a key role in the development and maintenance of body dissatisfaction and disordered eating. So it makes sense that students are talking about dieting and are concerned with the way that their bodies look. Body dissatisfaction is a prevalent issue among adolescents and is associated with negative outcomes, including behaviors to control weight, depression, dietary supplement use, and steroid use. There are a number of things that you could do to address body shaming and diet talk in your classroom. A good place to start would be to address the bullying. Approach bullying and negative comments like you would any other form of discrimination. Teach students that healthy bodies come in a variety of shapes and sizes. There is no ideal body, and all bodies are worthy of being respected, celebrated, and cared for. It can be important to take time to examine your own beliefs and attitudes about body size, eating, physical activity, and how you feel about yourself. You might wish to reflect on whether you share personal views about food, dieting, and body weight in the school environment. If talking about your own body, talk positively or neutrally. You are role models to your students, and what they observe has a huge impact on what they view as normal. It can be helpful to talk about what bodies do rather than what they look like. Don't admire or criticize the bodies of others. Instead, make positive comments about accomplishments or compliment others on good qualities and personality traits, such as creativity, humor, or art skills, rather than criticizing or overly admiring the bodies of others. It's important for students to learn the value of other qualities within themselves and their peers, and to celebrate their real successes in life. Offer lots of encouragement and specific praise to your students, focusing on their efforts rather than results. Something that you can do in your classroom is hang up body positive statements such as, "By being exactly who I am, there is so much that I can offer." Having a positive body image is associated with both psychological and physical well-being, including increased self-esteem, self-compassion, life satisfaction, and health behaviors. And it's also a protective factor against eating disorders. It's a great practice for yourself and your students to practice daily affirmation. In this scenario, a group of teachers during a staff meeting proposed their idea to have a month-long healthy eating challenge for their junior high students. This challenge would award points to students who bring a lunch that follows Canada's food guide. Pause the video and take a minute to think about this case study. How would you respond to this idea? Are there any ideas that you would put forward instead? While the intentions of the challenge may be in the right place, it's encouraging a variety of foods, there are a few concerns that you could bring up with this healthy eating challenge. This healthy eating challenge does not respect the individual roles of parents and caregivers, students, and schools at meal times. It's the role of the parents and the caregivers to decide what foods are packed for meals and snacks. Children are often not in charge of what foods they bring to school or what foods available in the home. The foods that students bring to school reflect their family's needs and resources. A challenge like this may inadvertently cause blame, shame, or stress for students that don't have access to these foods and are unable to bring meals and snacks that meet the criteria of the challenge. Schools are only in charge of what food is offered when it's provided or sold by the school. Students decide whether or how much to eat from what's packed, and we need to respect students' decisions about how much to eat. This includes eating foods in the order that they choose. We don't want children to feel pressure to eat certain foods because they feel like they have to in order to keep up their points. Ideas that could be brought forward instead could include, but aren't limited to, making improvements to the food provided in the school cafeteria or foods that are offered on special event days. Engage students in planning and taste testing new ideas. Suggest special events that explore food and where it comes from, such as a visit to a local farm or a grocery store. Engage students in creating comfortable places to eat. This could be as simple as voting on diverse and inclusive posters that take the focus away from food. In this scenario, you notice the coach of your school's high school basketball team praising one of the athletes for bringing a healthy lunch. The coach says, "That sandwich is packed with veggies and lean protein. Great job." After this statement, however, you noticed another player covering the contents of their lunchbox with their hands and looking down towards the floor. How might these comments be affecting that student? What could the coach do to provide better support? Pause the video and give yourself time to reflect. This scenario at first glance could be perceived as positive, as the coach is providing positive praise to an athlete for having a healthy lunch. Positive attention to children for having healthier items in their lunch can have unintended consequences, as children may learn to eat certain foods in order to receive praise. Other children, not receiving the positive attention for their lunch, may feel shame if they have limited access to those healthier choices. Children not receiving positive attention may also question the competence of their parents or caregiver to feed them properly. Younger children are not responsible for what's offered in their lunch, and while older children may have a greater role in deciding what to eat, these choices are still influenced by their home circumstances. It's important to avoid commenting on what foods are in a student's lunch and how much they're eating. Save nutrition education for outside of meal times. Mealtimes are not the best time for nutrition education because the foods in the child's lunch have already been decided by the parent or caregiver, or for older students by themselves. If students have foods that do not meet the education being provided, they may feel embarrassed, shame, or stress about the food that they have with their lunch. Keep nutrition education in the classroom or neutral settings instead of at meal times. When teaching about food in the classroom, focus on how foods taste, where foods come from, and what foods do in our body, such as grains like rice and wheat give us energy. The coach can also ensure that students have enough time to eat and limit distractions. It's best to provide a comfortable place to eat away from distractions and allow students to focus on eating and listening to their body's cues of hunger and fullness. This also allows for social interaction and casual conversation at meals, making mealtimes a relaxed and positive experience. Consider this scenario. You're at the library and two elementary school students are giggling over a book called Abigail the Whale. You hear one of them say, This looks just like Sarah. She's a whale too. Both of them double over in laughter. You ask them where they found the book, and they point to one of the shelves in the library. Pause the video and think about some steps that you could take. In this scenario, you might consider steps that you can take to ensure that materials in the school are not inadvertently encouraging negative commentary on bodies, and steps to address the weight-based teasing. Consider the media, advertisements, stories, books, educational materials, and posters in the school environment. These images and messages that we're exposed to directly or indirectly in our environment have a large impact on what we view as normal, preferable, or safe. They also create an image of the potential of who and what we can become in the world. Representation is important because it shapes how people are viewed in society. Are stereotypes being reinforced? And how people feel about themselves. How images, stories, or education portrays individuals can reinforce negative and inaccurate stereotypes. These messages are powerful, and they tell children how to view people that look a certain way, how to treat them, and what assumptions should be made about them. Ensure that books, media, advertisements, educational material, and posters are weight neutral and are representative of a variety of body shapes and sizes. Representing a variety of body shapes and sizes can help shift the value away from thinness. In studies asking women to select body shapes that represent their ideal body, the more diverse the body shown, the more the BMI of the ideal body shape increased. When shown groups of larger bodies, participants were more likely to choose a normal body type ideal, normal according to BMI, while participants were more likely to choose an underweight ideal when they were shown smaller bodies. The last thing here would be to treat the weight-based or size-based teasing with zero tolerance. Weight-based discrimination is one of the more common and in some ways acceptable forms of discrimination in schools, partly because it is so pervasive in our culture. Treat reports of weight-based or size-based bullying the same way that you would treat any other form of teasing or bullying between students. If the students are aware that the teacher heard their comments, it should be addressed directly to them. If they don't know that the teacher or a staff member heard them, the teacher may want to address the comments globally in the class. Students and adults are a product of their environment, and they may repeat phrases that they hear others saying. Provide gentle challenging and opportunities for learning without shaming. Some helpful phrases can be, "You're noticing that people have different body types. People don't like when you comment on how their body is different from yours, whether it's their size, their hair, what they're wearing, etc. It can hurt their feelings." Or, "Asking questions can help us learn and grow, but we will be kind and thoughtful when asking questions about other people and their bodies." Please pause the video or come back to this reflection at a later time. Based on your learnings today, I challenge you to identify one thing that you'll stop doing, one thing that you will start doing, one thing that you will continue doing, and one thing that you'll change. That thing, as you're doing this reflection, can be whatever you want it to be. It could be working on your automatic thoughts. It could be a classroom activity. It could be an object in your physical environment. It could be a discussion. Make it relevant to you. As we finish our time together today, remember that our relationship with food, mind, and body is shaped by influences in our environment. Using neutral language, exploring food using the senses, setting boundaries about body talk, exploring your own bias and relationship with food, and teaching food first will help you to create an environment where all bodies are welcome and the relationship with food is enhanced. We would love to hear from you. Please follow the link or QR code supplied to provide feedback on this presentation and your learning experiences. We are continuously evaluating our resources, and we plan to develop new resources on this topic area. We would value your feedback on what types of resources you need to teach and promote a healthy relationship with food in your classroom. Before we end today, I want to acknowledge that this work may feel like an uphill battle. Some of the topics and ideas that we've discussed today are not necessarily mainstream, and they may be muted by the plethora of dieting and weight-centric messages out there. All of us will likely experience feelings of guilt or shame as we reflect on things that we've said or activities that we've led. Please know that many of our behaviors have been shaped by social norms. We need to give ourselves some self-compassion and acknowledge that these came from a place of wanting to do right, and we were doing the best that we could with the information that we had at that time. Change can be uncomfortable, and as you bring these ideas back into your classroom, your school, or to your family and to your friends, you may be faced with resistance and doubt. But know that there are supports to help, and these are positive changes that not only positively impact children and our students, but also you. We're all learning, and the road may be bumpy, but this is how change happens, with one gesture, one person, and one moment at a time. To help you bring some of these key learning and messages to your classroom, please check out some of these resources. A copy of the presentation slides will be provided to you. Healthy Schools BC has created a toolkit titled Teach Food First, which focuses on using a food exploration approach to nutrition education. This toolkit supports educators with best practice approaches, resources, and lessons that connect with Canada's Food Guide and the British Columbia curriculum, are age-specific and age-appropriate, and consider equity and culture inclusivity. Ontario dietitians and public health have also come out with 2 great resources which describe how school community members can support students in elementary schools and secondary schools to nurture healthy eating. Sometimes comments made about someone's body, physical activity, or food choices can create negative feelings and behaviors, even when they're well-intended. These comments can be difficult to respond to. The Clever Replies to Damaging Remarks document provides examples of comments and responses that can help guide you. Check Your Weight is an AHS survey that will help you identify whether you have a weight bias. Another great resource is the Obesity Canada Check Your Weight Bias Blind Spot resource, which is specific for educators. Alberta Health Services webpage on healthy eating at school supports healthy food environments and provides resources for school teachers, child educators, parents, and health professionals working in schools and recreational facilities. As part of the Alberta Health Services Healthy Eating at School webpage, lesson plans and tools are available. These lesson plans include background information for teacher and student activities on nutrition and Canada's Food Guide. The plans listed on this slide are examples of neutral approaches that you can use to explore food with your students. Please reach out to the public health dietitians in your area if you're looking for resources or supports. We are always happy to help out. Thank you so much for your attention today on this session about how words matter. You are an incredible role model in the lives of your students, and you can lead change in promoting positive relationships with food. Take care, everyone.